erased from history. The whitewashing of Black biblical figures and its lasting impact. For centuries, the way we see biblical figures has been shaped by art, literature, and religious institutions. But what if many of the central figures in the Bible were Black, and history erased that truth? Ancient Egypt, Canaan, Ethiopia, and Cush. These were lands deeply connected to Africa, and their people reflected that heritage. The Bible itself speaks of the Cushites, the dark-skinned people of Ethiopia, and the pharaohs of Egypt. Yet, when we look at Western depictions of biblical characters, they appear European. How did this happen? A major shift occurred during the European Renaissance. Painters like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci created images of biblical figures that aligned with their own society, depicting Jesus, Moses, and Mary with European features. These images became the standard, influencing religious institutions and colonial expansion. When European missionaries spread Christianity, they brought these depictions with them, subtly reinforcing a racial hierarchy that placed whiteness at the center of divine representation. But let's look at the historical record. Moses, for example, was raised in the Egyptian royal court. If he passed as an Egyptian, what did he actually look like? The Egyptians of his time were dark-skinned Africans. The Queen of Sheba, a powerful ruler from Ethiopia, visited King Solomon. She was described as a woman of great wisdom and wealth. Yet, European art rarely shows her with the dark complexion she would have had. Simon of Cyrene, the man who carried Jesus' cross, was from North Africa. This small but significant detail is often overlooked in modern retellings. And then there's Jesus himself. Born in the Middle East, he was a man of Afro-Semitic descent. The earliest depictions of Christ, found in the catacombs of Rome and early African churches, show him with dark skin and woolly hair. The image of a pale, blue-eyed Jesus is a much later invention. The historical manipulation of biblical figures. The erasure of Black biblical figures was not an accident. It was a deliberate act tied to the expansion of European power, colonization, and the transatlantic slave trade. European rulers and religious institutions saw Christianity as a tool to justify their conquests. By reshaping biblical imagery, they made Christianity appear inherently European, distancing African and Middle Eastern people from their rightful place in its history. The doctrine of discovery, issued by Pope Nicholas V in 1452, allowed European nations to claim lands and subjugate non-Christian peoples. Part of this justification was the portrayal of non-Europeans as lesser beings. The whitening of biblical figures reinforced this hierarchy, making it easier for Europeans to present themselves as the natural leaders of the Christian world. Art and literature played a crucial role. Churches across Europe commissioned paintings and sculptures that reflected their own image. Biblical characters, from David to Mary Magdalene, were reimagined with European features. Even stained glass windows in churches reinforced this imagery. The printing press further solidified these portrayals. Bibles and religious texts featuring European depictions of biblical figures spread throughout the world. By the time these images reached Africa and the Americas, they were already established as the true representations of biblical figures. Today, scholars, historians, and theologians are working to restore the historical accuracy of biblical figures. Through archaeology, ancient texts, and early Christian artwork, they are uncovering the African and Middle Eastern roots of biblical history. Archaeological evidence. Excavations in Egypt, Israel, and Ethiopia reveal depictions of early Christians with African features. Ancient manuscripts describe the presence of Black individuals in biblical narratives, further proving that the erasure was a later development. Re-examining ancient texts. Many biblical references to people of African descent were either misinterpreted or ignored. Modern scholars are revisiting these texts to highlight the role of African and Middle Eastern figures. Representation in media. Filmmakers, authors, and artists are now challenging the traditional imagery by creating works that accurately reflect the diversity of biblical history. Recent films and documentaries have attempted to portray Jesus and other figures with historically accurate skin tones and features. The consequences of centuries of whitewashing run deep. Black Christians and other marginalized groups have struggled with the psychological impact of seeing divine figures who do not resemble them. The portrayal of a European Jesus and biblical figures has reinforced racial hierarchies, making it harder for non-European common Jesus and biblical figures has reinforced racial hierarchies, making it harder for non-European communities to see themselves as part of Christianity's core story. This also extends to global religious movements. European missionaries, carrying images of white biblical figures, often undermined local cultures and traditions, positioning European Christianity as the ultimate truth. Indigenous and African spiritual practices were demonized, while European interpretations of the Bible were enforced. The harm caused by these depictions is not just historical, it continues today. Churches, schools, and religious institutions still use these images, reinforcing outdated and inaccurate narratives. Many Black and African communities are now reclaiming their history, emphasizing the importance of seeing biblical figures who reflect their heritage. Reclaiming the true image of biblical figures is not just about history, it's about empowerment. Recognizing the African presence in the Bible restores a sense of identity and belonging to communities that have been marginalized for centuries. Education and awareness. Churches and religious institutions can play a role by teaching the true history of biblical figures. Incorporating accurate depictions in sermons, Sunday schools, and educational materials can make a difference. Representation in religious art. Artists today are reimagining biblical figures in ways that align with historical evidence. Encouraging the use of these images in religious spaces can help challenge the traditional Eurocentric portrayals. Community discussions. Open conversations about the impact of whitewashing in religion can lead to healing and understanding. Faith leaders can facilitate discussions that acknowledge the harm done while focusing on restoring historical accuracy. Supporting scholars and historians. The work of scholars uncovering the true history of biblical figures should be amplified. Reading their research, supporting their work, and sharing their findings can help shift the narrative. Religious institutions, taking responsibility. Churches and religious institutions must acknowledge their role in perpetuating these myths. By actively working to correct these inaccuracies, they can help heal the wounds caused by centuries of historical erasure. Personal reflection and awareness. Individuals can educate themselves and others about these truths. Reading books, watching documentaries, and engaging in discussions about biblical history can contribute to greater awareness and change. The whitewashing of Black biblical figures was not just an artistic choice. It was a deliberate act of historical revisionism that served to reinforce racial hierarchies and colonial ideologies. By reclaiming the truth, we restore the rightful place of Africa and its people in biblical history. Recognizing the Black presence in the Bible is not just about correcting a historical wrong, it's about ensuring that future generations grow up knowing that their ancestors were always part of the sacred story. The truth has been hidden for too long. It's time to bring it back into the light. Through education, awareness, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we can break down the false narratives that have shaped our understanding of biblical history. We must work together to dismantle centuries of misrepresentation and celebrate the rich, diverse, and complex history that truly defines the Bible and its people. The journey toward truth and justice starts with reclaiming the stories that were erased and making sure they are never forgotten again. Want to learn more about the untold stories of history? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content that brings hidden history to life.